So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on what if Naruto ended up in a harem with Mereoleona Vermilion and Black Clover. Don't forget to like and subscribe to help the YouTube algorithm spread this video to more viewers. Let me warn you guys, this fanfic contains strong lemon, so make sure to put on your headset and enjoy the video without any interruptions. Now let's start the story. Chapter 1. It's been 10 years since I joined the Magic Knights, and 15 years since I've been here. I wonder how bad things have gotten back home. These were the thoughts of a certain blonde young man of 25 as he laid atop the roof of a building. The look on his face gave nothing away as to how he was feeling, but inside he was in turmoil, just as he's been for the past few years. The blonde wore a black shirt with matching black pants under a black coat, which he wore unbuttoned. The coat itself was black with red fur along the collar, and the symbol of a red and gold shield with a lion in the center. Though in his current position one wasn't able to see the insignia. Ollie! Naruto! The now dubbed Naruto blinked, finally returning to his senses, and sat up. He twisted his head lightly both left and right until a crack was heard. Glancing down, he saw a younger red-headed member of his squad. The clothes he wore showed that he was a noble of the country. He wore a white tunic under a dark blue shirt with a high collar with gold trimming. He also wore a red sash that holds the shirt together. To finish the look, he wore white pants that extend slightly below his knees and a pair of dark blue shoes. Like him, he wore this under a red robe with the same lion insignia. He was the second son of the noble house of Vermilion, Leopold Vermilion. Yo! Naruto replied casually, giving him a small wave as he did so. The captain is on his way over here. You know he's going to berate you if he sees you on the roof again, right? It's unbecoming of a vice captain to laze around on the roof of his headquarters, is what he's gonna say. Leopold told him, briefly changing the tone of his voice to imitate the captain. Naruto sighed and disappeared from his spot on the roof, his body simply fading out of existence, and reappeared down below next to the young man. A red line moved from left to right, revealing him, almost as if a curtain had been moved from in front of him. The red-haired young man looked up at him wide-eyed, all visible in his eyes. I still don't understand how you can cast spells like that without summoning your grimoire, Leopold commented. I'm not even sure how that's possible, he added. Naruto shrugged. I've been able to do that since I got it. Maybe it's because it's such a low-level ability. You're the only one with spatial magic that doesn't actually create portals. No wonder my brother picked you as the vice captain of our squad, the young man complimented. Naruto smiled, but didn't bother telling him he wasn't really a spatial magic user. He'd been fortunate enough to be able to keep his grimoire hidden as long as he had. The only time he ever summoned it was when he was training by himself in a remote area. It's not that he wanted to hide it from his comrades. Rather, he didn't want word of his real magic to get out. Come to think of it, Leopold continued, you've been a part of this squad for years, and no one has ever seen it, he said, referring to the blonde's grimoire. My brother said he's never seen it either last time I asked him about it. Naruto smiled. I just haven't come across anyone strong enough or a situation dire enough to force me to use it. At least not here, he added mentally. But anyway, look alive, here he comes. The two men stood a tad bit straighter, and each gave a three-finger salute across their chest. Though, Leopold's salute seemed to have a little more life in it. Captain/Captain, they each said at the same time as the man approached them. The captain looked like an older version of the redhead Naruto was talking to. He basically wore the same thing as Leopold. The only notable difference was the height, and the longer red hair he sported, as well as a diamond-shaped mark on his forehead. He was the captain of the Crimson Lion Kings, Julius Vermilion. While the man was strict and worked everyone to the bone during training, he genuinely cared for everyone under his command. Though he was a noble of the Clover Kingdom, he didn't judge anyone based on their social standing like most other royals did. Julius judged people based on their true worth and their actions instead, something Naruto came to deeply respect about the man. Leopold, I'm glad I found you. We're to attend a gathering as ordered by the Wizard King tomorrow. I'll call for you an hour before we depart, the captain said to his younger brother, who seemed excited to meet the Wizard King. The man directed his gaze to Naruto. The Wizard King also asked for you to be present. He wishes to speak to you about something important. Of course, the blonde replied. He was slightly confused when the man didn't leave after relaying the message, instead continuing to stare at him for a second with an unreadable look on his face. Walk with me, he ordered and began walking. Naruto matched his pace as the two walked through the crowd of people. The two walked throughout the city in silence for a few minutes until Naruto said, I doubt you asked me to walk with you for no reason. Fugolian nodded. You've been my vice captain for a few years now, and have done a remarkable job. You command respect from the squad, and have proven that you'll do anything in your power to protect both him as well as the citizens of Clover. He began, glancing over at the blonde. The captain let a small smile form on his face before adding, all while never revealing your grimoire. There's even a rumor going around that you might not even have one. So that was it. Naruto matched his smile, and undid a small clip from the holder on his hip that held his grimoire. Though unlike some who had most of it visible, you couldn't make out anything from his due to the holder covering it entirely. So you want to see it? Naruto asked. To his surprise, the red-headed noble shook his head no, and continued looking straight ahead. I'm sure we'll see it eventually. It hasn't become an issue, so there's no need to force you to show us. A grimoire is special to us, so I won't force you to show anyone, he answered. So what is the issue? Naruto questioned. At this, the man finally turned fully to look at him, and uttered 2 words. William Vengeance. Naruto's eyes widened slightly, and seeing this, the captain continued. Over the years, I've noticed your reluctance to be near or work with the man. You eye him with distrust and always have your guard up around him, as if you're waiting for him to attack. Fugolian made sure to speak softly enough to where only Naruto would hear him. I'm not the only one who's noticed it. Captain Vengeance has told me that he believes you hate him for some reason. Naruto said nothing as they continued their walk. Instead, he was thinking on how to word his explanation. I don't hate him, but something about him doesn't sit right with me. Fugolian raised an eyebrow slightly and nodded at him to continue. I can't explain it, which is why I've never said anything out loud. Haven't you ever had a guy feeling about something that wouldn't go away? The blonde questioned. I have. It's like that. I respect his ability, and the fact that he doesn't behave like most of the nobles do. However, there's this lingering feeling I get around him that puts me on edge. Naruto finished. The two stayed silent for the next few minutes as they continued their walk and made their way back to their squad headquarters. As they approached the entrance, Fugolian stopped and faced him once more. Your intuition hasn't let us down yet. If you believe there is something wrong with Captain Vengeance, I'll try to keep an eye on him. I can't force you to drop your suspicion, but do be more discreet about it, the captain said before checking the time and fixing his clothing. Feel free to take the rest of the day off. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some business to take care of. Naruto watched the man leave and followed suit. He still had plenty of time left in the day. A little training could be good. While he was confident in what he could do, he wanted to be sure when the time came for Julius to uphold his end of the deal, he would be at his strongest. Every day, he worked towards using his advanced techniques while expelling the least amount of mana. It was difficult, but he was getting there. The next day, the blonde stood alongside Fugolian and Leopold inside the large room where the Wizard King had instructed them to meet. From what he'd been told, members of the Golden Dawn, Blue Rose, and Silver Eagles were supposed to be here too. Of the 3 squads, he couldn't really say he liked any of them. He got along with Charlotte to a degree. Her misandrous ways provided him amusement. The Silver Eagles were probably the ones he disliked the most. Unlike the Crimson Lion's captain, who judged based on your ability, the Eagles were heavy on social status. They believed that if one was of royal blood, they were superior. It didn't matter if the filth had a better personality or magical ability. To them, you were garbage, and they made no attempt to hide what they believed. Every time he heard them talk, he'd inwardly scoff at the blatantly prejudiced rhetoric that came out of their mouths. How Fugolian could stand Nozel despite their differing views, he'd never know. The 3 Crimson Lion members waited patiently for the next few minutes for the rest of the Magic Knights to arrive. After them, the first to arrive were the members of the Golden Dawn. Strangely enough, their captain was missing. No more than a minute later did the captain of the Blue Rose and one of her subordinates arrive. Finally, 3 members of the Silver Eagles arrived and took their places standing in front of them. The blonde nodded at everyone out of common courtesy, and to his surprise, the Silver Eagles captain, Nozel Silva, actually nodded back at him. Nibara, one of Nozel's younger sisters, simply glanced at him before scoffing and turning away, taking her place behind her brother. Friendly, isn't she? Naruto muttered, not caring if the woman in question heard him or not. Leopold tried not to laugh by faking a cough, while Fugolian remained stoic. Most likely because he was well aware of Naruto's dislike of most nobles. Naruto glanced at the large door, and then at the clock. Where the hell is he? Everyone's here already, he thought to himself. After 5 more minutes, the doors opened, and in came the man of the hour. He has short blonde hair and purple eyes, as well as a blue 6-pointed star seemingly tattooed on the left side of his forehead. He wears a long red robe with white fur around the collar, and 2 medals on each side of the chest. He's the 28th Wizard King of the Clover Kingdom, Julius Navachrono. Everyone glanced at him before directing their attention behind him, as he wasn't by himself. Behind him were 3 members of the Golden Dawn, and 2 members of the Black Bulls. "I apologize for being a tad late," Julius said with a sheepish smile as he walked past them. "Now then, let us begin the decoration ceremony." Julius stood behind a small table and had Marks, his assistant, hand him small black plaques with medals resting on them. One by one the members of the different squads were called, while Julius read off how many stars they'd earned. Everyone that went up to receive their new rank and medal was complimented in some fashion, whether it be on their magic or their achievements in the past few months. Once he handed the last Golden Dawn member his medal and new rank, he stepped back. "Well done, all of you. As of right now, the Golden Dawn earned a total of 71 stars. They're the clear leaders," he announced. The aforementioned members all had a proud look on their faces as they heard the Wizard King declare them the leaders. "I hope the rest of the squads do their best not to fall behind," he finished. Everyone nodded and did the 3-finger salute. "Now then, there is another matter I must attend to at the moment. Please enjoy yourselves for the evening." As he made his way towards the door, he stopped in front of the Crimson Lions and turned to look at Naruto briefly. "Naruto, would you mind coming with me for a moment?" Though it was worded like a question, everyone knew it was actually an order. Naruto nodded and took his place alongside the man and made their way out of the room. As they were walking through the nicely decorated hallway, Naruto asked, "So where are we going?" "We'll speak in my office," he said before giving a side glance to his bowl-cut having assistant. "Marks, please make sure all of our guests are attended to properly." Mark seemed like he was going to object, but a reassuring look from Julius made him decide otherwise. He bowed to the 2 of them and made his way in the opposite direction. Luckily for the 2 blondes, the Wizard King's office was not too far away from their current location, and they made it there relatively quickly. Julius took his seat at his desk and laced his fingers together, his face taking on a much more serious look than the one he wore at the decoration ceremony. "Things aren't getting much better. One of my sources tells me that outside attacks are becoming more frequent," he began. Despite trying to keep his cool, Naruto couldn't help but ball his fists at the information. Julius saw this and continued. "I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but that's the reality as of now. However, at this rate we might have to act within a year or so," he finished. Naruto's eyes lit up. "A year? He's waited well over 15 so far. What's one more?" "While I'd have liked to find another way to handle this situation and avoid fighting, it looks like we'll have no choice. You've upheld your end of our deal by pledging your grimoire to me up until now, and I plan on keeping my word to you." Naruto smiled, maybe the first real hope-filled smile he'd shown in years. "Thank you. I haven't had a decent night's sleep in years. Every time I close my eyes, all I can see and hear is everyone's screams. To know that in a year's time it'll possibly be over, I can't tell you how that feels." Julius smiled sadly at the younger blonde. "I can only imagine what you've had to endure by yourself these past couple of years. Would I be right to assume that that's why you've never tried to go for a captain's position?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah. The Knights deserve a captain whose first and foremost interest is the protection of Clover and its citizens. While I have grown fond of some of them, you know that's not something I can do." Julius stood up and stared out the window behind his desk, taking in the view of the kingdom. "I figured as much." The man stayed quiet for a minute, most likely organizing his thoughts before speaking again. "Naruto, do you mind if I ask you a question?" "Go ahead." "You suspect William of something, don't you?" Naruto wasn't shocked that the man knew about this. If his captain and even the man in question knew about his distrust, then it made sense that someone would either tell him or he'd find out by himself. Naruto didn't get a chance to respond, as the man continued. "I'm not sure what you see, but for the longest time I've felt that William has been hiding something from me. He's a kind person, but something in the back of my mind is uneasy," he admitted. Naruto could relate. That was basically the same problem he had when he was near the man. "While I'd like to disregard the feeling, my intuition has never failed me." Julius turned around and opened his mouth to speak, but stopped as the door opened and Marks burst into the room, a panicked expression on his face. "The capital is under attack." Naruto's eyes widened in surprise, while Julius remained calm-faced. "The Magic Knights have already mobilized and are making their way towards the attackers," Marks continued. "Naruto," Julius ordered. The king didn't need to say anything else as Naruto dashed out of the room at breakneck speeds towards the town. In almost every direction one looked, they'd see fire caused by the attackers. In the distance, explosions could also be heard and flashes of lights could be seen for split seconds due to magical attacks. The blonde jumped up from roof to roof until he was on one of the higher peaks to get a better look of the area. From his position, he was able to see the attackers. They were zombie-like mindless creatures that seemed to be attacking anyone and anything in their way. They have to be getting controlled by someone or a group. Unless they're really powerful, they'll need to be within a certain range, which means the leader must be around here somewhere, he thought to himself. Naruto closed his eyes and focused on everyone's mana. Leopold was with two other magic knights battling some sort of slug, while Fugolian was near another person he didn't recognize. Their mana felt dark, but not exactly powerful, though compared to all the other attackers, he was the strongest. That had to be the leader. Jumping down from his spot, he noticed two women running from a single zombie. In a split second, the mana-powered zombie dropped to the ground headless. The two women watched Naruto put his foot back down. They hadn't even seen him shoot the kick. Thank you so much," one of the women uttered out, still frightened beyond belief. "Please evacuate the area. The magic knights will take care of everything," he reassured them. The two nodded and ran off. Hopefully they wouldn't get caught. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw some Golden Dawn members rushing towards the sound of another explosion. They felt strong enough, so he didn't feel the need to have to go with them. He turned quickly in the direction of Fugolian when he sensed his captain completely disappear from the area. The man couldn't have been killed. There was no buildup of magic to indicate an attack. Maybe an ambush of some kind? If they had a spatial magic user, that could work. But still, for them to isolate someone as strong as the captain meant they were sure they could take him. Either they had someone more powerful, or they were planning to outnumber him. Both situations didn't look good. He flared his magic, letting a red aura surround him, as his grimoire floated next to him. It opened up to a specific page, and just like that, Naruto disappeared from the kingdom. When he reappeared, his grimoire had already closed and placed itself back in its holder. The first thing the blonde noticed was that they were in some sort of white room. The next thing he noticed was that he wasn't alone. Turning around, he came face to face with the scene of his captain on the ground, bleeding out from his missing arm. Standing behind him was some sort of elf? He had a regal appearance with red marks around his eyes, and some sort of golden cross ornament on his head that came down to his forehead. Though what really caught Naruto's eyes was the clothing he was wearing. It was the uniform of the Golden Dawn. In his mind, an image of their captain flashed. "Oh, how did you manage to get here?" the elf asked as his golden four-leaf grimoire rose up next to him. "This wasn't part of the plan." Naruto didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at the shocked look on his captain's face. "Who the hell are you? I suppose I can tell you since you're about to die anyway, human. You may call me Licked," he introduced himself. "A word of warning though, if you plan to fight against me, you will be disappointed." Naruto smirked. "Reality is often disappointing." "That is, it was," Naruto began as his grimoire rose up next to him. "Now, reality can be whatever I want." Licked, and even the still shock-induced Fugolian followed the floating grimoire, with their eyes taking in its appearance. It was a red book with multiple black lines that traveled in every direction. Every couple of seconds, the lines would change direction, creating brand new patterns on the cover. Though there was a small circle in the middle that no line crossed. What really caught the attention of the other two occupants of the room was the center of the book. It wasn't a 3-leaf, nor a 4-leaf. It wasn't even a 5-leaf clover, but rather, "You're from the Spade Kingdom?" Fugolian managed to get out before completely losing consciousness. "A mage from the Spade Kingdom? How peculiar," Lick commented. As he finished his sentence, his grimoire glowed a brilliant gold as its pages began to turn. A large string of light began to form in his palm and began swaying as if the wind was hitting a flag. "No matter." Flicking his hand, the elf forced the whip-shaped light sword towards the blonde-haired mage. Naruto stood still, arms crossed over his chest, completely unfazed at the incoming attack. As the attack got within centimeters of him, his grimoire let off a light red glow indicating the activation of a spell. His opponent couldn't keep the surprise off of his face, as the light turned into harmless bubbles upon making contact with his skin. Seemingly undeterred, Lick pulled his arm back and swung once more, forcing the whip to attack once again. This time he aimed for the body, but the result was the same. Light turned into bubbles once they made contact with his clothing. "Perhaps you didn't hear me the first time." Lick blinked as his mind registered that Naruto had appeared in front of him, a katana in hand mid-swing. The Spade Mage smirked as he felt his blade briefly make contact with the light user right before he teleported away. "Reality can be whatever I want it to be," he finished. Looking over to where Licht had teleported, he was pleased to see he was right. The man now sported a thin diagonal line from his lip to his eyebrow. A bright light emanated on the elf's face, and the damage he took seemingly disappeared. So it can be used for more than just offense, Naruto noted. He took a quick glance at his downed captain, and then back up at his opponent. Hugolian is still losing a lot of blood. I need to get him out of here. Licht must have noticed his glance as he smiled down on him from his position up above. To a normal person, it would have looked like a normal smile, but Naruto could see the condescension behind it. Don't worry about him. In a few short moments, you'll be joining him, the elf said to him. Naruto didn't respond to the taunt and decided to get on the offensive. Almost as if he flickered out of existence, he appeared in front of Licht once more, already swinging his katana horizontally. Like last time, the elf turned into light and appeared elsewhere a few yards away, looking completely unbothered. This space allows him way too much movement, Naruto thought. His grimoire responded to his will and began rapidly flipping pages until settling 1-1. The blonde swiped his hand through the air, and immediately the environment began to change. A small red line glided across the area, almost as if pulling back a curtain. As it moved, the space changed from the white abyss to what looked like a run-down planet at sunset. An incredible display of illusionary magic, Licht complimented as he took in the sight. It seemed like he was going to say more but cut himself off when something caught his attention, and he glanced to the side. An action done too late, as a glowing fist connected with the elf's cheek, sending him plummeting down into the rubble below. The ground below shook slightly, as the man was buried in the dirt. Illusionary magic? Naruto asked, his voice filled with mirth. Did that feel like an illusion? He continued when Licht pulled himself out of the rubble. This time Licht didn't immediately heal himself, instead taking a moment to look up only to find a second Naruto floating in the air. Similar to the environment, the second Naruto slowly faded as a thin red line passed over him. Reality magic, attribute change, Naruto called out. His grimoire began to change, slightly taking on a blue tint on the outer part of the book, while the inside remained red. In a split second, Naruto shot off a bolt of lightning towards the surprised man. Naruto had to admit, he was impressed that he could get himself together in time to dodge the attack. Due to the environment change, Licht was very limited in the places he could teleport to. This was something the blonde took advantage of, as he continuously shot off lightning bolts. He willed well over 40, and began shooting them off in random intervals, each one aiming for a possible place the elf could teleport himself to. He's still got too much space, Naruto thought, as he made hundreds of lightning bolts around the area. As he fired them off, Naruto raised his index finger upwards. The ground below the man currently dodging began to split open, and a large metal beam instantly shot upwards. Naruto's hands moved in a series of slashes, and created more metal beams, as well as stalagmites in every direction. The blonde could tell Licht was having a difficult time despite his speed. The man had to keep track of lightning bolts coming at him from every direction, as well as metal beams and spikes growing from the ground at incredible speeds. To make it even more difficult, Naruto willed the metal beams to close up above him to prevent him from escaping. Though there was a noticeable gap in the attacks on the man's left-hand side. Something his opponent took advantage of, or so he thought. He's taking the bait, Naruto thought happily, watching the man drift left. Not only that, but he also lost the calm, condescending look on his face. Now he sported a frustrated frown. Not that Naruto could blame him. He'd be frustrated too if every attack he fired was rendered useless upon contact. The spade mage snapped his fingers, and the attacks all began speeding up and changing trajectory, forcing Licht to unknowingly start getting closer. Now's my chance, he thought as he reached downward in front of him and extended them, as if he was opening a scroll. As his arms spread, a dark green beam of energy formed, taking the shape of a lance. Gripping it from the center, he lifted it up above his shoulder and took aim. His eyes followed the man's movements as he prepared to fire off his attack. Licht meanwhile was flashing in and out around the attacks, using the whip and light arrows to counter everything sent his way. When he finally noticed what Naruto had in his hands, it was too late. In the time it took him to blink, the green lance-shaped energy had been fired off, already having closed most of the distance between them. Much to Naruto's annoyance, however, the moment the attack reached its target, it was swallowed up by a black liquid-like substance that formed in front of the elf. Similarly, another layer of it formed behind the man, letting the attack come out and continue its course. The color around the area changed to a bright green as the attack hit the ground and exploded. Still, not all was lost. Even though the attack didn't hit the man directly, the explosion still had enough power to force the man to shield his face. The blonde forced the other attacks he'd sent out to disappear once he saw they were being absorbed and focused on their new arrival, who'd shown himself shortly after the shockwave from the attack. The man had a long white robe with a dark blue stripe in the center that contained 3 eye symbols vertically lined up. The most distinguishing feature about him, however, wasn't his gray hair or black scara, but rather the vertical black lines that bisected his eyes starting from his forehead all the way down his face. "Lick-sama," the man said in worry when he noticed the man's charred arms and partially burned face. "We need to retreat," he added when he noticed Lick wasn't making too big a fuss about his injuries. "Of course, Valtos. We got what we needed anyway." The entire floor beneath them all changed into the black spatial magic that Naruto now knew belonged to Valtos. He could feel himself slowly being pulled down. Quickly picking up his captain, who he'd made sure to have shielded during the battle, they began to vanish starting from his legs as the red veil began passing over him. "Next time I see you, I'm going to kill you," Naruto promised. The two were also sinking into the man's portal, but he knew he had some time to get his threat across. "At the very least, I'll be taking one of your arms if I don't." Having said his piece, the veil quickly passed over the pair, removing them from the area. The 2 mages reappeared at the capital, drawing stares from everyone around. Everyone who knew or heard of him looked wide-eyed at 2 things. First, their eyes were drawn to the downed captain, and then the red glowing grimoire floating next to him. He couldn't exactly blame them for staring considering the circumstances, but now was not the time for them to freeze up. "Get the healing mages here now," he ordered. That seemingly broke everyone out of their trance. Everyone began moving about, some helping him get the captain into the healer's hands before going back to helping any injured mages. Turning around, he faced all of the Crimson Lion members in the area. "What's the situation?" he asked. One of his squad members stepped forward, and 3 fingers saluted to him. "Sir, the invaders retreated, but they kidnapped a young knight from the Black Bulls. The one with the gray hair named Asta." "I see." Naruto closed his eyes and expanded his senses as far as he could. He could feel every captain in the area, as well as every knight and citizen. However, throughout the entire capital, the invaders' mana was nowhere to be found. The spatial mage must have taken them somewhere further out. He wouldn't doubt it if they were somewhere out in the Forsaken Realm. Not only were they gone, but there was one person he was looking for that was also nowhere to be found. "Julius is gone," the blonde thought to himself as he opened his eyes. He usually only leaves when he's messing around down here after hearing of cool magic. The only reason he wouldn't be here at a time like this is because he has an idea of where they're taking Asta. "Make sure all the citizens are safe and meet back at the base within 2 hours for an emergency meeting," Naruto ordered. "Leopold," he called out after seeing the young knight standing in shock. Walking up to him, Naruto placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder, making the younger redhead look up at him. "He'll be all right. He's going to be treated by the best mages in the kingdom. Come on, there's things that need to be done." 2 hours later, the entirety of the Crimson Lions were gathered below a small wooden platform, all murmuring silently amongst themselves. No doubt talking about the events of the day. Naruto walked up onto the platform and coughed once into his hand. The action alone caused silence to pass over the squad, everyone eager to hear what their vice captain had to say. "I'm sure by now you're all aware of what's happened today," he began. "Not only was the capital attacked by a terrorist group, but Captain Fugolian was also critically injured. I've since been updated by the healers that he's still alive, but has yet to wake up." Again, murmurs broke out amongst the squad members, though this time, he could see some of them looking visibly relieved at the news. It wasn't the best news, but it gave them hope. Up towards the front of the crowd, Leopold raised his hand. "Speak." The short red head stepped forward and cleared his throat before speaking. "Can you tell us what exactly happened to him?" He didn't have to give a name for everyone to know who he was talking about. "He was transported elsewhere and was ambushed by someone I didn't recognize. When I arrived, he'd already lost his arm. Unfortunately, I can't say more about the incident until after I report to the Wizard King," he replied with an apologetic tone. He had an idea as to how the young noble was feeling. Fugolian was his role model, a pillar of strength, and an example of what those of his house should strive to be. To see that very man in such a state and currently fighting for his life must have shaken him deeply. He saw most of the other squad members nodding to themselves, and he was thankful they understood. No doubt they too wanted a little more information. Naruto glanced back to Leopold, raising an eyebrow in confusion, as he saw the young boy stumble forward and shoot those behind him a dirty look. Regardless, he raised his hand again. "Yes? Well, word has gone around about your grimoire," he trailed off. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed softly. "I guess it can't be helped." The squad members, who hadn't been present during his arrival, visibly straightened up when a red aura surrounded the blonde. His grimoire floated next to him before angling itself, giving everyone a clear view of the black spade in the center. "If you hadn't already guessed it, yes, I'm originally from the Spade Kingdom," he revealed and paused for a second, letting everyone take the information in. "The Wizard King agreed that my origin was to be kept a secret due to some particular circumstances." The grimoire closed itself, and all aura faded from both the book and him as it tucked itself back into its holder. "I have no doubt that word is most likely already being passed around the other squads and will be addressed at the next captain's meeting either later tonight or tomorrow." He glanced at everyone in the crowd, and though he didn't let it show on his face, he was genuinely relieved that no one was looking at him in a different way. "After the meeting I'll explain a little more." The Spade Mage answered a few more non-spade related questions before dismissing everyone and heading to the captain's office. Pushing the wooden doors open, Naruto couldn't help but let out a frustrated breath. The office was usually always a place for him to unwind a bit, but now it brought more anger than anything else. Seeing the empty chair in front of the desk only reminded him of where the nobleman currently was. The thought of the captain immediately made him think of another. More specifically, the captain of the Golden Dawn. Naruto couldn't help but notice that the man had been missing during the capital attack, and Licht had been wearing a Golden Dawn uniform. Coincidence? Maybe, but he wasn't sure. He already distrusted the man, now he was on full alert. Pushing those thoughts out of his head, for now, he sat down behind the desk and began going over the papers on the desk. "I don't know how he does this day in and day out," Naruto thought to himself as he began reading and signing page after page. The amount of work ended up keeping him in the office well into the night. The following day, just as he predicted, Julius called for a captain's meeting. Since Fugolian was out of commission for the time being, he was to go in his stead. Though even if his captain had been in good health, he would have still been required to show up. He glanced around the room after opening the doors to the meeting room, and was pleasantly surprised to see all the other captains already seated. Naruto closed the doors and headed towards the only open seat in between Nozel Silva and Jack the Ripper. Julius smiled. "Now that everyone's here, we can begin." His face suddenly changed into a serious expression, one he only ever showed when a situation deemed it necessary. "Yesterday, Captain Fugolian Vermilion lost his right arm after he was ambushed by the leader of a terrorist group known as the Eye of the Midnight Sun," he began. Naruto couldn't help but notice Nozel's right hand clenched into a fist, and the man's eyes narrowed in anger. Despite the constant barbs the two partake in, the silver-haired man must care for his fellow captain in his own way. "Apart from the attack, Asta of the Black Bulls was kidnapped and taken to one of their hideouts. I trailed them discreetly and managed to capture 2 of their members, as well as eliminating 2 others. The Wizard King finished. "Where are the 2 captives now?" Nozel asked. "They're in a special jail having their minds looked over by marks," Julius answered. "During my encounter with the group, I came face to face with their leader. He's a powerful mage named Licht who wields light magic. He's different compared to his subordinates. He's one to be wary of if you encounter." Julius paused after that statement, letting everyone absorb the information before turning to the only vice captain in the room. "Naruto, I understand you fought the man during the invasion," he said as he retook his seat. The blonde nodded and stood up, making his way to the end of the table opposite Julius so everyone could see him better. As he made his way over, he had to resist the urge to glance at the captain of the Golden Dawn. He cleared his throat and began recounting the events of his battle with Licht, but made sure to leave out the bit about the uniform. Everyone's attention was completely on him as he retold his story. Even the usually bored Captain Yami and Dorothy Unsworth, who was always asleep, were giving him their full attention. He could tell that each one of them were taking mental notes of the abilities he described. Jack had a maniacal grin on his face as Naruto spoke, no doubt eager for the chance to try and cut through light magic. "After that, he was taken away by a spatial magic user, and that's when the captain and I made it back," Naruto finished. In a surprising act of courtesy, Yami raised his hand and waited for Naruto to motion to him. "Think he'll attack again?" Naruto shook his head negatively. "Probably not. Right before they left, Licht said they had what they came for. Fugolian was missing the necklace he always wears, so that must have been what they wanted." Turning to Julius, he added, "It would still be a good idea to increase security around the kingdom for the time being, though. When any other kingdoms hear of the attack, they may be tempted to try as well." The Wizard King thought the same and mentioned how he already had more knights stationed around the kingdom. "On the subject of other kingdoms, I believe there's an issue we need to address," Nozel interrupted. Naruto showed no outward reaction to the man's words. He'd expected this the moment he made his grimoire public. The man continued, "You are a mage from another kingdom. How do we know you aren't a spy sent to gather information?" Naruto glanced at Julius, who gave him the go-ahead signal. "Because the Wizard King is the one who found me when I arrived." All heads turned towards the leader of the Magic Knights, who nodded yes, letting them know his words were true. "What do you mean he found you?" Charlotte asked, speaking for the first time. "The Spade Kingdom has been taken over by 3 powerful mages. They call themselves the Dark Triad," he revealed. Most eyes went wide, with only 1 or 2 managing to keep their expressions neutral. No doubt they found it hard to believe that 3 mages had managed to take down an entire kingdom and take over. Naruto continued before they could ask anything else. "They killed the royal family and began using the citizens, who had low levels of mana, to experiment powering weapons. Anyone with useful magic was forced to serve under them, or they'd be killed." As he spoke, everyone noticed his right hand open and close repeatedly into a fist. Taking a deep breath to control himself, the blonde continued, "When they finally made it to my village, they sensed my mana and tried to take me away. My parents tried to stop them, but they were killed, and I was forced to get my grimoire. I was born with an unnatural amount of mana despite not being of nobility. I guess I'd be considered loved by mana," he said, making air quotations for the small phrase. "They were counting on me having powerful magic, and they were right. While you definitely have large amounts of mana, I don't believe it's enough for us to believe you're loved by mana. Most of us have just about the same amount as you do." Charlotte spoke again. "That also doesn't explain how you got here or your connection to the Wizard King," William added, his voice having no traces of suspicion. This was a sentiment many shared, though they did relax after Julius told them to be patient and continue listening. "May I?" Naruto asked Julius. A simple wave of the hand was his answer. The blonde slowly pulled off his jacket, letting it fall onto the floor, leaving him only in his t-shirt. This was the first time any of them had ever seen the blonde without his jacket. His grimoire rose next to him, the pages flipping quickly before settling on a specific sheet. Naruto's body began to glow, and with a snap of his fingers, black runes began to become visible along his arms. They ran up his arms and disappeared into the sleeves. Unknown to everyone else, they continued to appear on his chest and even on his legs. The black runes also began to glow a brilliant white before seemingly shattering like glass. This time none of the captains could contain their surprise when Naruto's red aura began to glow brighter before exploding in every direction. The ground, as well as part of the walls in the room, began cracking under the dense pressure of his mana. Small tendrils began to form, all swinging in an uncontrolled fashion. Their shock only increased when he began levitating, with small bits of electricity flashing around him as his power continued to increase. The only one who wasn't surprised was Julius, who was looking on with stars in his eyes, clearly enjoying the display of power. Even though Naruto had shown him what he was capable of, it never seemed to get boring to the man. Seeing that he'd proved his point, he willed the grimoire to flip to the next page. His aura began to return to him slowly, as the black runes once again appeared on his body, effectively suppressing it. Once the runes completely retook their place, they shined brightly before vanishing, as if they'd never been present. Picking his jacket back up off the ground, he dusted it off before putting it back on. "That was my power when it's not being suppressed. Sorry about the room, by the way," he added sheepishly when he noticed how much damage he'd caused. "Anyway, where was I?" "They took you to get your grimoire," Julius reminded him. "Right. When I got my grimoire, I wanted nothing more than to get away from that place. I didn't have anywhere specific in mind, just somewhere nicer than Spade. Somewhere I wouldn't have to worry about getting killed or abused. At that moment, my grimoire opened up, and I got my first spell. It warped me from Spade to somewhere nice, just like I asked, and I ended up in a forest in the Forsaken Realm. I'm not sure if it was fate or coincidence that the captain of the Grey Deer happened to be nearby when I appeared, but I'm glad he was. He told me where I was, and put a roof over my head," Naruto explained, and as much as he tried to sound natural, he couldn't keep the tone of gratitude out of his voice. Again, all heads turned to Julius, who sported a pensive look, no doubt replaying the events of that day in his head. Their heads turned back to the blonde, who continued before the king could say anything. "That's how I ended up here. I never showed my grimoire because I didn't want word to be spread back to Spade. You never know who might be around." Nozzle fixed the braid in his hair before speaking again. "You believe the Dark Triad would go out of their way for one spatial magic user?" The blonde narrowed his eyes slightly as the man's mocking tone, but didn't let it get to him. "For a spatial mage? No. I'm not a spatial mage, though. Everyone came to that conclusion by themselves. I use reality magic. I can distort and manipulate reality as I please, Naruto revealed. It suddenly clicked for everyone why he would be apprehensive. If they realized his true power, they tried to either kill him or use it for themselves somehow. Not to mention the lengths they would be willing to go through to do so were unknown. Before anyone else was able to speak up, Julius stood up and clapped his hand once. I believe that explanation should suffice for now, don't you think? It sounded like a question, but everyone in the room knew it was a statement. I've known about his origins for years, but never revealed them, as it never put Clover in any immediate danger. Anyhow, there's one more thing to discuss, he continued after Naruto sat down again. Since Captain Fugolian is out of commission for the time being, the Crimson Lions need a new captain. Naruto, until Fugolian wakes up, or if you can give me a better candidate, you will be the new captain. He seemed a little too happy to tell him that, in the blonde's opinion. That will be all for this meeting. Naruto, a word if you don't mind. Naruto remained seated as everyone vacated the premises. Some simply left without a word, while some left talking to each other. When the door closed, and only the two remained, Julius glanced at him. What else did you find out during your battle with Licht? Seeing the younger blonde blink once, he elaborated. I like to think I know you pretty well. Just like I can tell William is hiding something, I know you are as well. I trust you had a reason not to say it to the others? Naruto had to give the man credit. He was sure he'd done a good job omitting a detail. There was one more thing. When I arrived wherever they took him, I noticed Licht was wearing the uniform of the Golden Dawn. To Julius's credit, he didn't let anything show on his face at the reveal, but Naruto was sure he'd begin planning once the meeting was over. I see. That's definitely concerning. The two stayed silent for a moment before Julius spoke again, this time in a much lighter tone. I know you didn't want the captain's position, but at the moment you're the best choice. Naruto sighed and lowered his head. I'm aware. The only other person capable of leading that squad didn't even join the Magic Knights, otherwise they'd have been put in charge. Wait. What? Naruto's head snapped up to look at the grinning man. Who is this person? Naruto asked quickly. The first daughter of the House of Vermilion. Fugolian's older sister, Julius responded. His older sister? Naruto knew the man had one younger and older sibling, but he'd never really spoken much about his sister. He'd even heard Leopold mention how strong she was, but in the 10 years he'd been a part of the squad, he'd never met her. If she was strong enough to take the captain's position, it would be better for him. Do you think she'll join if I ask her? Naruto inquired. The man shrugged. Perhaps. It's worth a try, don't you think? Unless you're okay leading the squad. Naruto stood up and patted himself down once more, a look of fierce determination on his face. Where can I find her? Last I heard, she was at the Vermilion estate. She doesn't stay for too long, so if you want to talk to her, you'd best be quick about it. Naruto bid his goodbye and bolted out of the room, zooming past Marks, who was looking at the king with a curious look. He seems to be in a hurry, he noted. Julius chuckled. He's going to try and convince Mereoleona to take over the squad so he doesn't have to. Marks looked to the door and shook his head. You know she's probably gonna say no, right? She's refused every time she's been offered a captain's position. True. I have a good feeling about it this time, though. Naruto can be very persuasive when he needs to be. Marks blinked. My lord. Where exactly did you tell him to look for her? The grin on the king's face only widened at the question. You sent him to their home? Only hopeful suitors go directly to her home to look for her. Think of it as a small slap on the wrist for the damage to the room, he commented as he made his way out. Marks could only shake his head in disbelief at the antics of the Wizard King. As he followed the man to his office, he sent out a silent prayer for the young man. It didn't take long to reach the Vermilion estate from Julius's office. He only took about 5 minutes or so to find their estate. He'd heard from Leopold that their home was rather large, but seeing the main compound in person, their description didn't do it justice. He wondered just how many people lived and worked there for it to be properly maintained. He shook his head. That didn't matter. The Crimson Lions needed a suitable captain, and they would be getting one. He took a deep breath and knocked. Okay, how hard could this be? He said to himself. Julius wouldn't send me here for no good reason. The door was opened by a regal-looking older woman that had the family's trademark vermilion-colored hair. There was a slight difference, as hers was nowhere near as vibrant as Leopold or Fugolian, but the similarities in their facial features was enough for him to know this was their mother. Good afternoon, young man, she greeted before looking him up and down, noticing his Crimson Lion's uniform. Oh, you're part of my son's squad. Naruto nodded. Yes, ma'am. Vice Captain Naruto. He introduced himself. Lady Vermilion stepped aside and motioned for him to step in. Fugolian has spoken about you. It's nice to finally put a face to the name. Naruto couldn't help but notice the sadness in her voice as she said her comatose son's name. Good things, I hope. He jokes to try and lighten the somber mood. Seeing that it didn't really have much effect, he spoke again. Captain Fugolian is resilient. I'm sure he'll be up in no time at all. It'll take more than an ambush to kill a man of his caliber. The older woman smiled slightly and nodded at his words, lightly rubbing her eyes as she did so. I'm sorry. You're right. Captain or not, I still worry about him, all of my children for that matter. Speaking of which, young man, am I correct to assume you're here looking for my daughter? She asked. Naruto's eyes lit up. Good old Julius probably had this set up from the beginning. He thought to himself, not knowing that he was both right and wrong. Lady Vermilion slowly paced around him, looking him up and down while nodding every now and then. She lifted his arms, lightly feeling his biceps before standing in front of him with her arms crossed. I approve, but I do have to ask. Does her age not bother you? From what Fugolian has told us, you're barely in your mid-20s, 25, if I recall correctly. Naruto blinked twice in slight confusion at her question. What did that have to do with anything? Of course not. Her age doesn't matter. There's no one else I'd rather ask, he answered truthfully. His confusion only grew as the woman seemed to beam in happiness at his words. Lady Vermilion clapped her hands together. Excellent. Though just so you know, it is customary to show up dressed a little more appropriately. He looked down at himself and frowned. What was wrong with his uniform? What's going on here? Naruto turned to see an older-looking man step into the room. He looked like an older version of his captain, though this man had some slight gray in his hair. The clothing he wore was similar as well, except he didn't have any Crimson Lion sigils anywhere on his person. It wasn't hard to deduce that this was Fugolian's father. Oh dear, this is Naruto, she said, introducing him. The older man's face changed slightly, letting him know he'd also heard of him. He's here looking for Mereoleona. At the mention of his daughter, the man stood up straighter, and like his wife before him, began inspecting him. After a few tense seconds, the man nodded, seemingly satisfied. I've heard from Leo that you're a Spade Kingdom native, he commented. Naruto nodded. I am. He briefly wondered if the man was going to begin telling him something about being a foreigner, but to his delight, he didn't. I can sense very powerful magic from you. Can I assume that burst of power we felt earlier today was you? He asked. Naruto scratched the back of his head in slight embarrassment, still remembering how he'd partially destroyed part of the room. Yeah, I had to put on a display for some of the captains at the meeting. Lord Vermilion nodded. An impressive display if we were able to feel it that strongly even from here. Very well, let us head elsewhere to discuss the terms while I call for my daughter, he said, motioning him to follow. Terms? He thought to himself. This was getting more and more bizarre as time went on. He didn't think he needed her parents' permission to leave the squad. Maybe noble families did things differently, he added afterwards. He followed the man to his study and was offered a seat in front of the desk. Naruto watched as the man searched through his drawers, quickly going through papers until he found the one he was looking for. It was a small stack, maybe 7 or 8 pages in total, that was placed in front of him. So this is the basic contract, but before we sign these we'll need to negotiate the dowry amount, the man told him. I believe 12 million y'all should be sufficient, don't you think? Naruto's eyes widened as the realization of what was happening finally dawned on him. Before he could counter, however, there was a knock on the door. Enter, Lord Vermilion called out. The door opened and in walked the very person he'd been looking for. This was the first time he'd seen her, and he couldn't lie, he definitely liked what he saw. Like the rest of her family, she had long vermilion-colored hair. She wore a white tunic-like shirt that displayed some impressive cleavage underneath a long-sleeve, high-collar blue shirt. She wore white pants and around her waist had a pinkish sash that kept her shirt tight. Similar to Leopold, she had one canine-like tooth on display, and similar to both of her brothers had red marks around her eyes. She crossed her arms and looked down at the blonde seated in front of her father. Naruto stared back and could immediately tell this woman had a temper. He wasn't sure why, but that was actually kind of attractive. Good you're here, the older Vermilion commented. I thought it wouldn't happen after the last one all those years ago, but it seems I was mistaken. Mereoleona glanced down at the desk and recognized the papers immediately. She looked back at Naruto with narrowed eyes. Is that right? She asked out loud. The blonde, seeing that things had gotten way out of hand, stood up and cleared his throat. Okay, it seems like there's a giant misunderstanding, he said, trying to do some damage control. Unfortunately for him, Lady Vermilion took that chance to step into the room with him. The look of happiness on her face told him things weren't going to be getting any better. Leona, this fine young man has been speaking nothing but good things about you since he got here. Your age doesn't matter to him, and he said there's nobody else he'd rather ask. Quite the charmer if you ask me, she commented. Naruto had to resist the urge to cup his face in his hands, as things seemed to just get progressively worse. Right. Mereoleona trailed off. Why don't we let him speak for a second? She nodded her head to Naruto. It seemed she had picked up on what was clearly a misunderstanding, something he was grateful for. Naruto coughed into his hand. I'm sorry, but this whole thing is a giant misunderstanding. Yes, I did come here looking for your daughter, but not for marriage purposes. Now it was Lady Vermilion's turn to look confused. Wait, but only people looking to propose come directly to the familial home of their intended bride. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized Julius had indeed set this up. He'd set him up knowing he'd be stuck in a mess like this. He knew that the man must be somewhere laughing at what he was currently going through. Naruto made a mental note to get the man back for this. I'm sorry to say I wasn't aware of this custom. Gugolian never told me about noble customs, and some of the nobles I have met made me not want to know at all, he said, referring to the Silvas. Part of him felt a little bad for the older woman as he saw her happiness disappear in an instant at his words. Mereoleona shook her head in disbelief. Well, now that that's been cleared up, you follow me, she ordered Naruto. The two walked out of the room and made their way deeper into the house. As they walked, the blonde couldn't help but shake his head at all the very expensive-looking art and furniture that decorated their home. They had maids and butlers walking around the place, each doing something different. Naruto, he heard from behind him. The two mages stopped and turned around to see Leopold running up to them with a somewhat angry look in his eyes. Yo! The blonde greeted back happily. You never said you planned to marry my sister. He shot back somewhat angrily. Looks like word had gotten around the compound quicker than he thought. Just as he was going to explain everything, he was beaten to the punch. He'd been correct in his assumption that the woman had a temper. In a split second, her grimoire was out, and a large appendage made of fire gripped the young mage's head. She lifted him off the ground and continued making her way outside, not at all bothered by his futile attempts to free himself. Once the three of them were in their very large backyard, she tossed the boy off into the distance. He wasn't sure where she'd flung him to, but he figured she'd probably done it enough times to not hurt him too bad. This way, she said. He followed her for another minute or so, his eyes briefly looking down to take in her form. He did stop rather quickly as an older woman in a maid's outfit smirked at him, no doubt catching him checking the firstborn daughter out. Mereoleona stopped at a small bench that was far enough from anyone else and sat down, crossing one leg over the other. So you're the one everyone's been talking about, she began. The mage from Spade Kingdom, and if Leo told anyone else, you should expect people congratulating you on your coming engagement soon, she added with clear amusement. He sighed. I hope he didn't tell anyone. Anyway, I'd really love to have spoken to you for the first time under more pleasant circumstances, but I don't have that luxury, unfortunately. I'm sure you're aware of your brother's condition. I've heard. He'll be all right, I'm sure of it, she said confidently. He will, Naruto agreed. The Crimson Lions need a new captain, he said, getting straight to the point. She chuckled. So you came to me? They didn't tell you I've turned down the offer for becoming a captain every time? You're powerful, and the squad already seems to trust you a great deal from what I've heard. I don't see the issue with you leading, she said, crossing her arms. I'm sure some don't mind, but I know not everyone trusts me the way they did before. Some no doubt feel like I didn't trust them enough to tell them I was from Spade. Not only that, but I'm also not what a captain should be. Mereoleona raised an eyebrow at his statement. Explain. A captain should have the kingdom and its citizens' best interests at heart. Gugolian was the perfect person for the job. Me, he said, pointing to himself. I have another kingdom's future that I'm worried about. You plan to go back to the Spade Kingdom, she deduced. Does the Wizard King know about this? He nodded. When the time is right, I'll have his support, he replied cryptically. Mereoleona studied him for a second, her face void of emotion. Finally, after what felt like hours, she sighed. I'll think about it. I'll stop by your office in a few days with an answer. If it helps persuade you, it would be a temporary position until your brother wakes up," he added, trying to talk her into it. The woman laughed and motioned him away with her hand. Seeing the dismissal, he made his way back towards the front door. He bowed once to Lord and Lady Vermilion and apologized once more for the confusion before making his way out. As he made his way back to the Crimson Lion's headquarters, he ran a hand through his hair. He really hoped that she would take him up on the offer. If not, he'd have to find someone else, and he wasn't sure there was anyone else who was captain material. 3 days passed and Naruto hadn't heard back from Fugolion's older sister. He had thought about going to their home, but decided against it, not wanting another encounter with the family. Leopold was also out of the question to ask, because even though he'd explained the situation, the young man still didn't believe him. Asking if his sister had spoken about him in any way would only make it worse, so he decided to sit patiently. Just as he was halfway through reading a memo from the Wizard King, there was a knock on his door. The head of one of the newer squad members peeked in and locked eyes with him. "Sorry to intrude, but there's a woman here to see you." He perked up. Naruto was going to answer, but saw the top of the young man's head grabbed by a fire claw before he was lifted and moved out of the way. The door opened fully to reveal Mereoleona making her way in. She at least had the courtesy of gently placing the young magic knight back on the ground and letting him scamper off. Closing the door behind her, the older woman took a seat and crossed her arms. "I assume you've made a decision," he started. She nodded. "Normally I'd decline, but seeing the condition my younger brother is in, I feel the need to at least cover for him until he decides to wake up." Naruto sighed in relief, glad that the woman had come around. "However," she continued, "if I'm going to be the captain of the squad, things will run my way." It wasn't an unreasonable request. As long as she was fair to everyone and continued helping the squad earn stars from the Wizard King, he wouldn't complain. Mereoleona shot him a challenging smirk, clearly going to enjoy what she was going to say next. "That means if you want to be my vice captain, you're going to have to prove yourself." "Prove himself?" "I think I've done a pretty good job all these years," he shot back. "From what I've heard from my brother, you're very capable. Your use of spatial magic was incredible, is what he would tell me." She made sure to make quotation marks with her hands at the word spatial, letting him know she was aware of his magic. "I trust him, but I want to be sure. If you're going to be watching my back, I need to make sure I know what you're really capable of. I want to see you using your real magic," she told him in a serious tone. "How would you like to do this?" he asked. The woman smiled fiercely, and a small shiver ran down his spine. She was looking at him like prey as she stood up and motioned him to follow her with a single finger. He stood up and made his way out the door, making sure to stay close behind. Feeling his pants ride down just a tad, he quickly tugged at his belt to tighten it up some. Unfortunately, at that moment, Leopold saw them and quickly appeared in front of him. "Leo," Mereoleona called happily. "I hope you're keeping up with your training, because if not, things are going to get rough for you soon." The youngest Vermilion sibling in the squad looked perplexed. Usually Mereoleona wasn't in such a happy mood when she was in the capital. Meanwhile, Naruto continued tugging at his belt when something told him to look up. He saw Leopold narrow his eyes at him and glance back at his sister, who still had a smirk on her face. His eyes then dropped down to Naruto's hands, who were still in the process of fixing the tightness of the belt. The young man's eyes widened slowly, as he seemingly figured out the cause of his sister's good mood. He was wrong in his assumption, of course, but the events over the past few days didn't make him see it that way. "We can't chat now, Leo." Mereoleona cut him off right as he opened his mouth. "Naruto and I are going to train at my spot for a while. We'll be back soon to whip you all into shape," she said, once again motioning for the blonde to follow. Naruto internally groaned as he passed by the young man, who was still glaring at him. He knew the older Vermilion didn't mean to, but she just made her brother believe they were going to be doing a different sort of training. It would be tough to convince Leo otherwise after this. He followed her to a grand magic zone that had a large volcano erupting. The area around was hot, immensely so. As the two walked further up the mountain, the air became hotter, making it that much more difficult to breathe. In response to the change in the environment, his body began to glow a light red as he covered himself in a thin layer of mana to prevent himself from feeling the effects of the area. He caught a glimpse of Mereoleona glancing back at him with an approving look on her face. Like him, she'd also covered her body in a thin layer of mana to prevent any side effects of the area. They steadily climbed higher and higher until they made it to an area with a rather unique platform. They were surrounded by jagged rocks and large cliff faces on either side of them, and two small rocks just big enough for them to stand on were in a smaller volcano. The woman jumped across the gap and landed safely on the ground and motioned him to follow. He did so and landed on the other rock. He looked down to see the lava below them occasionally spewing out balls of fire every now and then. "Here's how it's going to work," she began. "We're going to fight until I've seen enough. We're not limited to this area. Anywhere you want to fight, we'll go. Don't hold back," she added afterward. Naruto cracked his neck and summoned his grimoire to his side. Like everyone else, he saw her glance at his grimoire, taking in every detail of the foreign book. Mereoleona looked back at him and shot him another one of her animalistic smirks as her magic flared around her. "That look on your face, you look like you're ready to be devoured by a lion," she commented happily. In the time it took him to blink, the woman was on him. He jumped in the air just as a large blast of fire engulfed the area where he'd stood. His eyes darted to the side as a blinding light quickly made its way towards him. Similar to when he fought Licht, he waited until the fire was just about to touch him before acting. The flames instantly changed into a harmless mist in seconds. He smirked at the woman's surprised face as she appeared through the mist and quickly shot his leg out. Mereoleona reacted quickly and brought a hand up to block and was mostly successful. Though she managed to block, the force behind the blow did send her soaring down towards the lava below. It wouldn't be that easy, however, as she simply stood in mid-air and began charging at him again. The woman pulled her arm back and began punching rapidly, sending multiple large bursts of fire in his direction. He could have easily turned them into mist as well, or even made them disappear altogether, but that wouldn't help him out. She wanted to test him to see what he was capable of, to see if she could trust him to cover her in battle. Knowing they'd inevitably face the eye of the midnight sun again, he changed his strategy up. "Reality magic, attribute change," he called out. The woman tilted her head ever so slightly, and her eyes darted to his grimoire. The book changed from a bright red with black lines to a bright pink, with only the spine staying red. Naruto's body also took on a pink hue as the color of his mana's skin changed in conjunction with his grimoire. He made a slashing motion with his hand at the fireball making its way toward him, easily cutting the projectile in half. Two more slashed and Mereoleona was forced to move from her spot as well. The rock faces behind her had deep slices in them. "Oh, cutting magic?" she wondered. "Not exactly," he responded as he landed in mid-air. Well, not exactly in the air. Mereoleona could see a very thin white line stretching from one side of the rock to the other beneath him. The two didn't speak again, instead Naruto flexed 3 of his fingers. The woman had but split seconds to move before deep cuts began appearing all around her. A small tear in her sleeve followed by a thin line of blood appearing on her arm told her she hadn't been fast enough to completely dodge. Though she'd been slightly caught off guard, she was quickly back in attack mode. The speed of her punches increased, and Naruto had to begin maneuvering through the air to avoid being hit. "Not bad," she yelled from behind him, a red fist already cocked back. The blonde put a hand up in front of him and quickly formed what looked like a spider web in front of him that met the attack head-on. The spider web held on long enough for the fire to die down, but he didn't plan on her having another attack ready while one was dying out. A large beast's head made of fire easily broke through the web, making its way towards him. Thinking quickly, he quickly flexed 2 fingers and disappeared from his position. "Fulbright," he called out from high in the air. His hand swiped downwards towards the soon-to-be captain, and 5 white strings shot down at breakneck speeds. Unsurprisingly, she managed to evade the strings. The rock below her where the strings had hit was easily sliced into pieces. The two went back and forth, one shooting fireballs in rapid succession while the other swiped and hacked at the air, cutting everything in sight. Mereoleona's smile never left her face as the two battled, and even Naruto found that he'd begun enjoying himself slightly. Spars with Ugolian were always very strict, never getting too out of control. The man's sister, however, had none of those restraints. "Kalido's Brachium," Mereoleona called out as the magic around her flared. The blonde could feel the immense amount of power behind that attack and put up 2 hands, creating 2 spider webs above one another. Unfortunately, the attack was far stronger than he'd anticipated and easily broke through the string defense. For the first time since their battle started, he took a direct hit. He barely had time to register the pain as his back crashed into the rock face. Mereoleona, however, wasn't idle and continued her charge. Another large fireball was making its way toward him, and as he jumped to avoid it, he saw the woman waiting for him in the air. "She knew I'd jump," he thought to himself as she got closer. Just as she sent another fiery punch at him, he raised his hand, palm facing her. A dark red ball quickly formed before stretching out, looking like a large whip. The whip made contact with her arm and easily pushed her back. He took a few deep breaths and swiped at his mouth, using the back of his hand to wipe some blood off. That punch had really done a number on him. He tried not to smirk as he thought of his next move. Woman or not, he was going to do a number on her. She did want to know what he was capable of, right? Mereoleona quickly got herself airborne again and pulled her hand back for another attack. Just as she went to punch, however, she stopped. Her eyes narrowed at him and began trying to look around, only for her head not to move either. "What did you do?" she asked. Her tone wasn't angry but rather both curious and frustrated. "I attached one of the strings to you during that last attack. They're thin enough to not be sensed if moved slowly enough or if you're distracted enough not to notice." He flexed two of his fingers and smirked when he saw her body begin to move according to his whim. In a flash, he appeared in front of her, his face only an inch or so away from hers, and delivered a strong uppercut to the woman's chin. Not allowing her to get away, he swiped his hand down and forced her back towards him. He spun in midair, using the string below him as a spring, and kicked her aside into the rock face. The rock broke both because of the initial impact and because the woman's body caught fire moments after hitting. He could feel the string that held her body hostage disappear due to the immense heat the woman was radiating, and knew they'd have to end things quickly. "Mana Zone Kalitos Brachium," she called out. Now he could see why this was her place to fight. The immense amount of mana in the area resonated well with her attribute and easily amplified her attacks. This version was far stronger than the last one he'd taken. She was in front of him in the blink of an eye. The area began to glow white as the attack connected and exploded, emanating a bright light that could be seen from miles away. Mereoleona stood atop one of the only remaining rocks in the pit, taking deep breaths. She looked down at herself and saw many more slices on her body, and could feel a pain in her ribs whenever she took a breath. Her chin was also slightly tinted blue from that attack he'd landed on her when she was unable to move. The smoke cleared, and the only expression that appeared on her face was confusion. Naruto's body was missing from the waist up, but rather than guts or any blood, only strings were present. The body shimmered for a second before falling apart into a white clump on the ground. "Goshikido," she heard from behind her. Naruto swiped one hand at her leg, and 5 strings, all different colors, easily began tearing into her. He saw the woman grit her teeth as she was forced down to a knee, the strings having cut some of her muscle. He'd made sure to not cut enough to amputate or leave permanent damage. Something told him the woman probably wouldn't care and would rather continue that battle, but he wasn't going to do that. Blood quickly began pouring down the woman's leg, and he knew this was his chance. "Reality magic, attribute change." His grimoire changed from pink to a bright red, mimicking the woman's, and he knew he only had a split second to attack. Now that he changed magics, the string holding her in place would disappear. "Let's see how this goes." "Kalitos Brachium," he called out as his fist made contact with her cheek. The attack wasn't as grandiose as hers, mostly due to the amount of mana he spent up until now. Changing to string magic had lessened the drain, but it was still reality magic, and took up an immense amount of mana. Mereoleona was sent upwards, her body crashing into part of the rocks before landing on one leg on the surface above. Naruto was amazed that she was still sending him a challenging smirk. Her body was now littered with cuts and bruises. "I haven't had this much fun with someone from the squad in a long time," she said loudly. "I'd love to continue this, but I think I've seen enough." Naruto nodded and forced his grimoire to change back to its pink form once again. Not letting her ask anything, he moved his fingers and began stitching up her clothes until they looked good as new. He'd have done her body too, but that sometimes interfered with the healers, and he didn't feel like dealing with the paperwork. "Does that mean I passed?" he asked jokingly. He chuckled and grabbed his abdomen in pain, the feeling of that one attack finally kicking in. Though he wasn't as cut up as she was, he was definitely bruised from where she had managed to land hits. "Absolutely," she said as she walked over to him. She had a slight limp in her step, which was amazing considering she shouldn't even be able to walk. "Let's go inform the squad," she added as she passed by him. The two made their way back down the mountain, talking about what they would have to do to whip the squad into shape. It was much faster going down than it was going up, and the two made it back to the headquarters in record time. They walked in through the front door, and everyone stopped what they were doing and stood at attention. "Everyone listen up," the woman yelled, authority clear in her voice. "From now until my brother wakes up, I will be taking the position of captain of this squad. Enjoy the rest of your day because starting tomorrow, your training regimen is going to change." Everyone put up the 3-finger salute and nodded to her. Happy having settled that, The woman made her way into what used to be her brother's office. Naruto! Said man turned around to see Leopold once again looking at him with suspicion clear in his eyes. Yeah? Why is my sister limping? Naruto was going to ask if he didn't see the bruise on her, and turned to look at said woman. She was looking right at them, and he realized if she was looking straight you couldn't see the bruise, since it was directly under her chin. Leopold! Leave Naruto alone. We have important matters to discuss, she ordered. The blonde really wanted to hold his head in exasperation, as everything she said only seemed to egg her younger brother on. The young man walked away, but not before promising to keep an eye on him. He sighed and made his way into the office. He hoped the boy would see it was just a huge misunderstanding. Despite that though, he smiled. He'd finally gotten a captain for his squad, and he had a good feeling about her. A few weeks had passed since Naruto had convinced Mereoleona to take over the Crimson Lions, and he could confidently say she was doing great. The only issue was that the woman was a total slave driver. While Fugolian also had him participate in training, it wasn't to the extent that his older sister took it. It had been a while since he felt sore from training, but it wasn't an unwelcome feeling. At the very least he made sure the woman got as much as she gave. The knights under their command were all in pain by the end of the day, but there were already results on display. Anything else, sir? He glanced back at the civilian, who was putting his food on the counter. No, that will be all, thank you. Paying for the meals, he picked up the bag that the small takeout boxes were placed in and made his way out. While he wasn't one for constantly ordering takeout, today was an exception. One of the cooks who worked at the Crimson Lion's base and provided their meals fell ill and wasn't in. That wasn't to say he didn't trust the culinary ability of the others, he did, but no one could make a meal like the old man. To that end, he told his captain that he'd be getting food and was instructed to bring her some as well. Vice Captain! Naruto stopped the moment he exited the building and turned to see one of the advisors of the Wizard King standing next to him. A message from the Wizard King! Seeing that he had Naruto's attention, he continued. You're to report to his office at once. I'm unaware of what's needed of you, only that it's of high importance. He sighed. Already he'd had to miss lunch due to how long training had lasted, and he could feel his guts begging for food, but it seemed he'd have to miss out again. Nodding in agreement, he lifted the bag towards the man. All right. Can you do me a favor though and drop this off to my captain? She's hungry and waiting for it. The man seemed affronted at the request. He was an advisor to arguably the most powerful man in the kingdom, and he was being asked to be a chore boy? Look, you're already sent out on a delivery. Just do me a favor and drop this off to her, please. The man held his stare, but eventually relented and took the food off his hands. He walked off saying something inaudible, and Naruto just shook his head. He didn't know why he was mad, if anyone should be mad at him. He was lucky it was Julius asking for him, otherwise he'd have told him to wait until he was free. Stuffing his hands in his pockets, he made his way towards his office, wondering what could be so important he'd be summoned. He was half tempted to use his magic to just take him there, but the last thing he needed was more people staring at his grimoire. Rumors had circulated about his nationality, and unsurprisingly, some of the nobles had begun to look at him differently. Most of the captains and magic knights didn't seem to care at least. Arriving at the doors to his office, Naruto was greeted by Marks, who stood up straighter and bowed slightly. Vice Captain Naruto, the Wizard King is expecting you, he said, pushing the door open and allowing him to enter. Nodding to the overly uptight man, he made his way inside, and saw Julius standing in front of the large window behind his desk with his hands grasped behind his back. Marks closed the door behind him, leaving the two men alone in the office. The door flashed white for a moment before regaining its original color. Seeing as Julius wasn't saying anything, he walked up until he was standing next to the man and took in the sight of the kingdom below. Thank you for coming, Julius finally spoke. I apologize if you were in the middle of something important. Naruto shrugged and ignored the loud rumbling his stomach made. No problem. You usually don't call me here unless it's important anyway. The Wizard King smiled and nodded. I'll be sure to make this quick then. His eyes lit up. Also, congratulations on your engagement, he commented with mirth. Naruto's eyes darted to him, and saw the man struggling to keep a straight face. Though, the way his shoulders trembled ever so slightly told him he was close to breaking out in laughter. The younger blonde narrowed his eyes. You almost married me off to Mereoleona, he accused. Would that be such a bad thing? Julius asked in a calm tone. He brought one of his hands to scratch his chin and pretended to think. I'm sure you once told me you turned a woman down because she was. He started snapping his fingers, trying to remember the details. Oh right, too nice and fragile. That happened years ago, Naruto thought with a sweat drop. I'm surprised he remembers that. It wasn't like she wasn't attractive, she definitely was. The problem was that she was an ordinary civilian of the royal capital with nothing but her family's money to her name. She was polite, but was still the perfect example of an aristocratic daughter. She wouldn't talk back, couldn't fight, had no backbone, and he was sure she'd do anything if he asked. That wasn't what he was looking for. You've been a great help not just to me, but for the kingdom as a whole, Julius continued. I thought I could repay some of that by setting you up with someone who suits your tastes a little more. At this point the facade of a well-intentioned man broke, and he was completely grinning, clearly proud of the handiwork he orchestrated. I see. Aren't you a benevolent god? He asked sarcastically. The king let out a laugh and Naruto couldn't help but join in. Once they were able to get themselves under control, Julius coughed into his hand and put on a serious expression. All jokes aside, I did call you here for a reason. Hearing the tone change in his voice, Naruto stood up straighter and gave the man his full attention. On the day that the capital was attacked by the Eye of the Midnight Sun, they managed to not only get the drop on Captain Fugolian, but also kidnap one of the members of the Black Bulls. He explained. Asta, the king nodded. Correct. What I haven't revealed, however, is something that I saw when I went to retrieve him. There was a stone tablet with 10 different areas for a specific item to be placed in. Stone tablet? Naruto thought curiously. He tried to think back over the years to see if perhaps he'd come across something like Julius had described, only to shake his head. You said their leader told you they had what they were here for, right? If that tablet is connected with the stone, that means there has to be at least 9 more, he deduced. So they're collecting the stones to then put on the tablet? Naruto asked rhetorically. I doubt it's just for aesthetics. Do you have any idea what the tablet could be used for? Julius shook his head. No, but it can't be anything good if they were willing to attack the capital and ambush a captain. These stones are the reason that I called you here. I need you to do something for me. Naruto nodded. I'm going to put the Black Bulls in charge of searching for and retrieving the stones, he informed. Yami's squad, Naruto thought to himself. Despite what most of the general population thought about them, he knew they each had their own strengths. Even if most of the time they seemed to reinforce the negative reputation they'd acquired. Yami was dependable and powerful, but no one seemed to want to recognize it. The only person who did was Charlotte, but she tended to be cold and uncaring towards him due to her not-so-subtle crush on him. It just went to show how prejudiced the people in the kingdom were. Naruto could relate to Yami almost more than anyone else. Both of them were outsiders in the kingdom, and even though they weren't from the same place, the two had a connection on that front. Another member that was quickly written off was Asta. He'd learned more about the boys since the attack on the capital. Having the ability to essentially delete magic was ridiculously powerful. If that wasn't enough to at least get the recognition from the people, he didn't know what was. If that's what you believe is best, I won't question it. That doesn't tell me why you called me here, though. At this point his stomach once again let out a loud grumble, reminding him that it had been more than a few hours since he'd had his last meal. Julius chuckled at the younger man and continued. It won't be much longer, I assure you. Apart from the Black Bulls, I also wish for you to coordinate with them and help with the stone retrieval when possible. You and Yami are some of my most trusted subordinates. I trust that the two of you would be able to keep the stones safe until they're brought back. Naruto brought his hand up into the 3-finger salute and nodded. Of course. Should I inform Yami of the situation? If it's no bother. I have a bit of work that still needs to be done and Marks wouldn't be pleased to have to chase me down again, he said with a laugh. The two were silent for a moment before Naruto spoke. Has there been any word from your informant in Spade? Naruto asked nervously. They're building machines that are capable of long-distance movement from what I've been told. We're not sure of their immediate purpose, but they're big. Knowing what they've done up until now, it's almost certainly some sort of new weapon, he said in a grave tone. Naruto couldn't help but clench his teeth for a moment, but stopped shortly after. Getting upset would solve nothing. The only good news we've gotten is that the attacks on other kingdoms have ceased for the moment. Well, at least others will be spared for a little while. I suppose we're lucky that we won't have to worry about them while we deal with what we have going on right now, Naruto commented. The king nodded in agreement and focused his attention back to the many people walking down below them. We can focus our attention fully on them before turning to Spade. While you and the Black Bulls handle the stones, I'll keep a close eye on William. That was the best news Naruto had heard all day. Perhaps around you he'll slip up. He knows I don't trust him, so he's completely guarded. There was a moment of silence after that. each man lost in their thoughts, none of them pleasant. I really hope I get the chance to see this soon, Naruto suddenly said. Julius didn't need to look away or ask him to clarify what he meant. He knew Naruto well enough to know what he was talking about. I'm sure you will, he said with complete confidence. In the time you've been here, you've done a lot of good for our people, and I'll do right by you when the time comes. Naruto smiled gratefully. I'm glad. I do have to ask if King Clover will be okay with this, though. I can't imagine he'll agree to something like this. You'd be leaving your kingdom to fight a war on my behalf. The king waved off his concerns with a small shooing motion. I haven't said anything about that yet, but I won't need to get any approval. When the time arrives, Spade will most likely be on the move. At that point, it will become a military matter and my power will be equal to that of the king, he explained. As far as he's concerned, we'll be securing an alliance with the largest kingdom after putting you in power. This time, the older blonde turned to look at him before speaking again. I have a question for you as well. I know you plan to kill the Triad, but what will you do about Spade then? What I'm asking is, how will you set the country up? The man was curious to see where the soon-to-be ruler of Spade's head was. I'm not too sure just yet. I might take a page out of Clover's book and assign both a king of the kingdom and the military. Whether I'll use the name Wizard King is up in the air, but I'm not too sure about everything just yet. I'm also thinking of ways to improve our agriculture due to the weather. Making sure even those living in our version of the Forsaken Realm are doing well enough get by comfortably is another problem I've been mulling over. Julius put a comforting hand on his shoulder and smiled at the younger blonde. The fact that you're already thinking of improvements for the kingdom and its people tells me you'll be a great leader, he told him. If you're not sure about things just yet, you can always ask. I'd be more than happy to help. Naruto knew something was wrong when the look in the man's eyes changed. His expression went from serene to mischievous in seconds. You can ask me, or you can chat it up with your fiancée. She might have an idea. In a fraction of a second, the man disappeared and reappeared on the other side of him, just in time to avoid the fist that would have connected with his face. Well, as much fun as this is, I do have work to do, Julius said, calming his laughter. Recognizing the obvious dismissal, Naruto saluted once more and made his way out of the office. Crimson Lion's base. The chat with Julius had taken about an hour, and by the time he made it back, the sun had already begun descending into the horizon. Some of the members were leaving the building, having finished their duties for the day and very much eager to enjoy their free time. They nodded to him as they passed, and one of them gave him his thanks for the food. Naruto was slightly lost. Had he taken him for lunch and he'd forgotten? Possibly. Deciding to ignore it for the moment, he made his way in and immediately headed for the captain's office. Most of his work for the day was done, and he was starving. Knocking twice on the door, he waited until the captain's voice on the other side told him to enter. Taking a seat across from her, he sifted through the papers that he'd left on the desk earlier in the day and made sure everything was in order. Hugolian really took it easy on the squad, didn't he? Naruto looked up to see Mereoleona still looking over a document in her hand. It was double-sided, and he could see that it was a document outlining their training regime and what equipment they would need to purchase and write off. I wouldn't say take it easy, just not as enthusiastically as you. She smirked at the answer and added a few additions before placing it aside and leaning back in the chair. Mereoleona stretched her arms above her head and leaned from left to right. Her eyes were closed, and she held the stretch for a few seconds on each side she leaned on. Try as he might, his eyes couldn't help but take a glance at her chest that was being presented to him. The white shirt she wore under the red cloak really did their best to contain them. His eyes moved back up to her face just as she finished and crossed her arms. So what did the king need? She asked curiously. He's assigned a joint venture between Yami's Black Bulls and myself, he responded. Speaking of which, I'll have to talk to him tonight, he said, more so to himself. Mereoleona blinked. The Black Bulls, huh? I suppose he has his reasons for choosing them. Before either of them could reply, Naruto's stomach once again growled, this time a tad bit louder than before. Hungry? She asked in an amused tone. Naruto nodded. Yup. I got caught just as I picked up the food. Did you enjoy it? She shrugged. I'm not sure. I didn't have any. When I was told where you had to go, I gave it to some of the knights that were passing by. Realization hit the blonde as he now knew why they thanked him when he got back. She'd given the food away, which meant, You haven't eaten either? He asked. The woman shook her head. No. I was meaning to talk to you about some of the members of the squad to get your opinion, but that's when I was told you've been summoned. Instead of eating, I went ahead and spoke to them about some missions they'd be leading next week. If you believe they're ready, I'm sure they'll do fine, he responded. Is there anything else that requires our attention for the day? No, those papers over there were the last of them, she said, standing up. Naruto nodded, thankful that there would be nothing in the way of him eating now. A glance at his captain reminded him that she hadn't eaten because he never came back with the food. Hey, Captain, he called, getting her attention. I'm gonna get something to eat. You wanna come? She looked at him for a moment and nodded. Why not? I'm starving too. Today's training session pushed me harder than before, she said with a wild smirk. I do wish you'd use something other than strings. I'm getting tired of the same old tricks. Or is that all you've learned to use? The two magic knights made their way through halls of their headquarters, discussing where the best place for some food would be. As they conversed, they didn't notice that up ahead, taking cover just around the corner of another hall, was Leopold. His eyes narrowed at the vice captain, who seemed to be getting on a little too well with his sister. If the captain catches you sneaking around instead of working on that spell you're struggling with, she'll be pissed, you know. One of the older women of the squad told the youngest of the Vermilion children. Leopold jumped slightly and scowled at the woman before telling her to beat it. She shook her head and shrugged before leaving him be. I need to see what he's up to, he said just before she left. What's the problem? He went to lunch with Captain Fugolian plenty of times, she said. Leo turned to look at her with a frown and replied. Yes, but my brother wasn't all smiles like that, he said, pointing to where the two highest-ranked knights in their squad had exited. The woman laughed and shook her head. Whatever you say. XXXXXXXXXX. The pair ended up at the same place where he'd been earlier in the day. Most places in the capital that had the best food required reservations months in advance. There were a few places that would make exceptions for magic knights, but those were a bit further out. Mereoleona insisted they just go to the same spot, and ended up getting seated near one of the windows. While they waited for their food, they were brought strong sake as requested by the captain. She filled their cups up, handed one to him and raised hers into the air, and wanted to clink the glasses together. That's the stuff. The only thing that could make this better is the warm water of the hot springs, Mereoleona said after chugging her drink. The blonde quickly gulped the drink and placed it in front of her for a refill. I'll say, he agreed. After downing the second round, his captain crossed one leg over the other and leaned back into the booth. So a Spade Kingdom native, huh? She suddenly said. I can't say I've met too many interesting people from that kingdom, until now, that is. Tell me, what's it like over there? Cold, he responded instantly. It's a far cry from the weather we experience here, but it's beautiful in its own right. As much as I dislike the constant snow, I find myself missing it now. Even though it had its share of problems, it's still home, and I'll do anything I can to fix things there. She stared at him with interest clear in her eyes at his statement. Oh, you plan to retake the kingdom by yourself? Here you are. Careful, it's still hot, the waiter said as he dropped off the food to their table. They thanked him for food and quickly switched plates as they'd been given each other's orders. The conversation was briefly halted as the hunger finally caught up to them, and they began to devour the meal. Naruto couldn't help but notice that despite being a noblewoman, she didn't eat in the same overly sophisticated manner that he'd seen from someone like Nebra Silva. It was refreshing to see someone who was royalty completely disregard what he'd expected of them. Back to your question, no, I don't plan to retake Spade by myself, he answered. Mereoleona bit into her food and took a sip of her drink while mentally going over everything she knew of him in her mind. Sure, they'd been working together for a few weeks, but in that time, all she knew of him was that he wasn't a native of Clover, used reality magic, and was very well acquainted with the Wizard King. That last point momentarily stopped her. The Wizard King, she stated. I've heard from some of the other captains that you and the king have been good friends for years now. What's the story there? I have an idea, Naruto said, prompting her to raise an eyebrow. Fugolian never mentioned he had a sister. Just like you don't know much about me, I know next to nothing about you. I'll tell you about me, but you tell me about you. The woman smirked. I suppose that's fair. All right. Go on and tell me about how you ended up here. He recounted the story he gave the captains at the meeting after Fugolian went down, making sure to omit the power reveal. He didn't want to cause any property damage at the moment. Julius may have been alright with setting him up for marriage and retribution, but Mereoleona was more likely to punch him through the wall. That's when I woke up in Clover. He was curious about me, and when I told him what happened, he was sympathetic, he recounted with a smile. He placed me in a foster home, so I'd be fed and educated but still constantly dropped by. When he learned what kind of magic I had, I swear he had stars in his eyes. Is he the one that convinced you to tell people you were a spatial magic user? She asked. She had been curious about him before, but after hearing his story, she was far more interested. He nodded. Seeing as I was still young, we thought it would be a bad idea to let word get out about my magic. Eventually, as I grew, I got stronger and was able to use it well enough that people bought the act. During his time as captain of the Grey Deers, he took to showing me better ways to use my magic. He taught me a basic fighting style that I ended up making my own and helped me create what I call a tribute change. Mereoleona inwardly whistled at the information. He had an insane magical affinity and had basically trained with the strongest mage in the kingdom for years. The memory of his grimoire changing colors and allowing him the use of strings crossed her mind, and she couldn't help but wonder what other types of magic he knew how to use. A wild smirk began appearing on her face as the thought of the battle she could get from him entered her mind. Naruto saw the look on her face and had an inkling of what she could be thinking. Maybe telling her that wasn't such a good idea. The lesson stopped shortly after he became Wizard King. He stopped by one last time to let me know and told me if I'd like to join the Magic Knights. He continued. At first, I turned the offer down. I wanted nothing more than to get strong enough to kill the bastards who took my home from me. And then? This is where your question gets answered. He made a proposition. If I swore my grimoire to him and Clover by default, he'd help me retake my home when the time came. Is that right? She asked. You've been here for years. When is this supposed to happen? In about a year. We've been keeping an eye on Spade's activities, and we'll act within the year. His captain crossed her arms and nodded. Very well. I'll be joining you, she decided. He blinked slowly a few times, trying to wrap his head around what she just said. I'm sorry. She nodded one more time. Had it not been for you, my brother could have died. I'm confident he'll pull through, but like it or not, the way I see it, I owe you one for what you did. It's settled. I'll be joining you. To cement the decision, she filled up their cups once more and raised hers high into the air. Seeing as having her present would only bolster his chances, he didn't try to talk her out of it and tapped her glass with his. Well, that's all there is to it, he said after gulping the liquid down. Honestly, if I hadn't met Julius, I doubt I'd be where I am today. Nonsense. What? Seeing the confusion clear on his face, she continued. Everything you've accomplished was done by your own efforts. Even if you hadn't met the Wizard King, you would have become strong because you have resolve. You would have figured out what you were capable of and gotten to where you were regardless, she told him in a stern tone. Now it was his turn to smirk. I didn't know you thought so highly of me. I respect strength and those who have the drive to better themselves. You've proven that you have plenty of each. Now that his story was done, she began to recount her time growing up in the Vermilion estate. It seemed she was powerful even when she was young, and like him, she originally had no desire to join the Magic Knights. While she thought her upbringing was boring, he actually found it very interesting. He'd learned more about her as well as Fugolian. She spent most of her time in the wild and preferred to train by herself. Some of his quips during the more lighthearted parts of her story resulted in a flaming hand squeezing his head. That's it. Now here I am running my brother's squad until he wakes up, she concluded. Looking down, she noticed both her plate as well as his were wiped clean. She hadn't even realized when she'd finished her meal. Let's go! We need to be up early for training tomorrow, she announced. Naruto stood up and paid for their meals and joined her outside. I still have to go talk to Yami about the king's orders. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll cover dinner next time, she said just before he left. You technically bought twice today, so I'll make sure we get something good. He smiled and nodded before heading out. Hopefully Yami was still awake. XXXXXXXX. The first thing he did upon reaching the Black Bull's base of operations was step aside after reaching the front door. Before he even got the chance to knock, a body was expelled at high speeds. Oh, Naruto! Yami's uninterested voice rang out. What brings you here? We have a job from Julius, Naruto informed him. Yami took a pull from his cigarette and blew smoke near one of the silver-haired member's face. All right, let's hear it, he replied, making his way back into the base. Naruto followed his lead to the main room in the center of the base. All around his squad was either bickering among themselves or eating an obscene amount of food. The only one who was seemingly doing their own thing was the woman he knew to be Vanessa. The witch, who wore basically just a bikini with a small cloak over it, looked over at him and winked before chugging down an entire bottle of alcohol like it was water. Yami let himself drop onto the small couch he had situated in the room and looked at him expectantly. So? What's the message? Your squad and I have been put in charge of retrieving the magic stones before the eye of the midnight sun can, he told him. The man still kept his uninterested look, but he sat up a bit straighter in his seat. How many more are there? 9. 9 more. We don't know how many they currently have except for the one they stole from Fugolian. I was just told to let you know that we could be sent out at any time. As he finished speaking, a gray blur passed between the two men, suddenly stopping and taking the form of the same kid that had been kidnapped a little while ago. The Wizard King is trusting us with something this important? Asta asked loudly with stars in his eyes. The top of the young man's head was gripped tightly by the captain and his body was lifted in the air. His legs were flailing around as he tried to free himself to no avail. Hey brat, did you finish cleaning? Yami asked in a dark tone. Naruto could swear he saw the man's darkness magic surrounding him while he spoke. All done, Captain. The blonde liked them, but he really wanted to get some rest. Placing his hands on his knees, he pushed himself up and made his way out. Well, I just wanted to let you know what was going on. I'll be seeing you. Hold on. Yami's voice rang out. Naruto turned around and raised an eyebrow in question. Yes. We've only ever gone on simple jobs together. Since the reveal of your magic, I need to know exactly what you're capable of. Yami turned to the black bulls and cleared his throat. Everyone outside. We're gonna be having a little exercise. The blonde sighed and followed everyone outside. Just like his lunch, it seemed that sleep would have to wait until later. This chapter ends here. Let me know in the comments what you think of this Naruto and Black Clover crossover experiment. Should I make more videos like this? If you're ready for more, just click on this next video and enjoy the ride.